And joining us now, Ben Rhodes, the former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Obama. Ben, thanks for waiting. Thanks for being with us. Are we reaching a tipping point here in our relations with Israel? Do you think that the critical mass is developing potentially in the Senate, as well as among some House members, on aid to Israel, given that, as you would know, and as a lot of other people might not know, Jose Andres is very well known here in Washington, knows all these members of Congress, has been here for years and years before he was on the national and international stage. People go to his restaurants. This feels like a local tragedy as well as a global tragedy to a lot of people in Capitol Hill.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly feels like we're approaching some kind of tipping point, Andrea. And, we've been moving in this direction for a long time. This is the most right-wing government in Israel's history. This is a prime minister, Bibi Netanyahu, who has really not listened to successive American presidents. And this is a military operation that has caused a humanitarian catastrophe that clearly hasn't factored in the ability to get assistance in to desperate people who are now facing famine-like conditions, that doesn't have a plan for how it comes to a conclusion. There's no plan for how Gaza is going to be administered, what's going to happen to the 2 million people there. There are real substantive differences between the U.S. and most of Israel's traditional allies and the Netanyahu government about whether a military operation goes forward in Rafah, about the blockage of assistance. And so when you have an event like this, such a glaring, tragic event, it kind of encapsulates a lot of the concerns. Why could there be a military strike against clearly marked civilian aid vehicles that had deconflicted with the IDF? Why are they doing that in the first place when you could just simply drive aid trucks across these crossings if Israel would open them up? So the strike both hit home in terms of how much people are familiar with Jose Andres and his organization, and the strike also kind of illuminated what people have been concerned about for weeks, if not months, in a lot of cases, in the United States Congress. And the president has been really holding out against conditioning. I mean, now they say they're considering it, but others in his team, in the State Department, even in the White House, and perhaps even the First Lady, judging from the comments that they permitted to be made public, wanted some action to be taken, some change in the policy. And the president could have been the last holdout at the top of the government, and of course the most important one in terms of changing the policy. It certainly feels that way. I mean, he wanted to take this approach where, you essentially embrace Israel and its objectives, but then try to counsel restraint or try to counsel changes in tactics and strategy. The problem is that the gulf between the United States and Israel on this military operation has just been getting wider and wider and wider. And we've seen now for weeks voices of concern, voices of outrage, voices of demands for Israel to do this or that with respect to aid or with respect to moving to a ceasefire. But Bibi Netanyahu does not listen to the words of U.S. presidents and U.S. politicians, particularly when he's more focused on keeping control of his very far right government, right? The people that he needs to stay in power, in his view, are people in his coalition, and that includes some pretty far right people. And so we're in a situation now where the real leverage the U.S. has is the military assistance that Israel is using to conduct this military operation. That if you really do have these concerns and want to see a change in Israeli policy, you actually need to use some leverage here. And the leverage is principally the military assistance. It's also voting for a ceasefire at the United Nations Security Council. It's also, frankly, there have been some punitive steps like sanctions on some of the settler leaders who've been engaged in violence in the West Bank. There are tools available, but President Biden has clearly been reluctant and remains somewhat reluctant to use those or even signal that he's considering those, but he's now facing a lot of pressure from within his own party, but also from around the world, Andrea. I'm sure that a lot of world leaders are calling and saying, hey, you're the one with the influence here because you provide so much military assistance to Israel. We can't have a famine take place before our eyes in Gaza. Of course, the difficult situation has been, and it was articulated by Richard Haass and others, other American Jews who have long supported Israel, who are saying you can be supportive of Israel, as the president was trying to say to Netanyahu, don't say that I don't love Israel. You can do that and still be critical of the way this government, this right-wing government under Bibi Netanyahu, is conducting the war. I think the trigger point could be, for conditioning aid for the president, could be Rafah. And we understand from our reporting that Israel is not ready to go in with a ground invasion yet.
But if they were to do that against the U.S., I think that that would be a big change. One other thing, there's so much in the pipeline with Israel, so much had been approved by Congress that 2,000-pound bombs and other 500-pound bombs were approved on the very day of this strike. And they'd been long approved by Congress, by the State Department. It was just announced that day. And all of that aid is going to continue to flow. But May 8th is the date for this new law where the U.S. will have to then certify for all countries that get U.S. weapons that they are using those weapons appropriately according to U.S. law, right?
Yeah, there are also existing restrictions, Andrea. If the U.S. makes a determination that certain assistance is being used in ways that are contrary to international law, or if the recipient of military assistance is not taking steps to allow in civilian aid, the president can make a determination to withhold that assistance. It's not, there's nothing that says we have to ship these 2,000-pound bombs. And Andrea, I can tell you that those were not weapons that were envisioned to be dropped on densely populated civilian areas. You know, these are things that are meant to maybe get at deep underground bunkers. And so the way in which these weapons are being used is not consistent with, I think, U.S. law or the way in which U.S. policymakers envisioned it to begin with. And to your point, I think there's an argument that can be made, too, that this is not good for Israel. This military operation is isolating Israel to a point that I can't remember in recent decades, frankly. It's not achieving the military objective of freeing the hostages. You don't free hostages by dropping 2,000-pound bombs. And frankly, it's not clear that it's achieving the objective of destroying Hamas, because it's obviously turning more and more the Palestinian public further and further away from any desire to want to, negotiate a peaceful resolution with Israel. So I think you can frame an argument here that that if your concern is the long-term security and well-being of Israel, supporting this military operation by this government is not the way to do that.
No, I understand that point, Ben. And to your earlier point, there was at least one 2,000-pound bomb used, according to official sources, my sources, in the first weeks of the war on that refugee camp, which is what began to turn world opinion against, Israel, despite the horrors that Israel experienced from Hamas, the terror group, on October 7th. And that was counterproductive to Israel's position in the world. We're going to have to leave it there. But Ben Rhodes, as always, thank you very much.
Hey, everyone. MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.